Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Joe, he's Nick, and you are listening to the Nick and Joe Show. I'm in the studio live, the Think Radio Broadcast Center here in Canada's national capital. We're not quite locked down yet, no curfew in place, so that means that once we're finished broadcasting, because it's 8 p.m. here in Ottawa, which would be probably the curfew time, we'll get into that in a few minutes, but I would not be able to drive home. So I guess that if I'm going to do the show from the studio next week, if we have a curfew, I'm going to probably just have to sleep here, so I'll pull a bed in. Of course, the problem is that is an explicit violation of the terms and conditions of our lease. I'm telling you, this government is just driving me crazy. And speaking about being driven crazy, Nick is out at the farm. And can you hear me, Nick?
I can hear you just fine, Joseph.
So, are we having fun or what, Nick?
Nobody has more fun than we do, Joseph. Nobody.
And, every week during our production meetings, we always look at one another, or in this case, we aren't actually...
Talk to one another.
We aren't actually looking at one another across the table with cow eyes. We always say, Nick, no more COVID-19. We don't want to talk about that. Please, no more COVID-19. No more pandemic stuff. But we just can't stay away from it because no matter how hard we try to stay away from it, it turns out that our politicians cannot. And so here we are in Ontario, and we are on the best knowledge we have at this point in time is that we're on the verge now of the Ontario government imposing a curfew across the province. And the Quebec government now has a curfew as well. And I'm telling you, I would support a curfew if I had the slightest bit, just the teensiest iota of faith that a curfew would help to reduce the increased rate of infection out there in the public. I just have zero faith totally. And I'll explain why that is in a minute, but I know you want to blow off some steam here, Nick, so I'm just going to let you start blowing off steam. Get it off your chest, Nick.
Well, one of the things that has... All right. Well, I just lifted my safeties, which is an old stoker term for letting off some steam. There's an old saying that running, if you don't know what to do, you don't do anything. Well, it doesn't seem to be the modus operandi. It seems to be a government at any level. Everywhere you look, there's more of this. We don't know what we're doing, so we're going to do more of it, which is the very same thing as running into a room and screaming the number 42. Well, unless you know what that represents, so what? It's the same thing as saying, well, there's a disaster, we got to do something, but we don't know. Well, what do you want to do? I don't know, let's just do something. And when you do things like that, when you deal with situations like that, you usually make things worse. Sometimes it's better to wait until you have more information so you can make an intelligent, informed decision before you actually go and do anything. Because until you know what you're dealing with, you have no basis to make any decision on. And this whole COVID thing has been a dog's breakfast from the beginning. The other thing you mentioned in your opening monologue was the idea that you don't know what to believe anymore. There's just this whole flying by the seat of your pants attitude that seems to be out there, and this is how people lose faith in their government. When you've been either completely incompetently led or lied to, I don't know which is worse, and I'm not sure it matters, over and over and over again, as often as we have, then the question becomes, why should I believe you now? And I agree with you. I don't think this is going to make one hill of beans difference to this whole situation. It infringes on our rights and our freedoms. It is not effective as far as curbing anything, because nothing else they've done seems to have worked. There are other practical solutions you and I have already talked about, that need to be that could be taken that actually deal with the problem without interfering with the masses in their daily lives. But they don't want to do that. Now we have our Prime Minister, and we'll get to this in greater detail in a minute, but our Prime Minister threatening us with fines and jail time if we don't abide by the rules. Well, I certainly hope he applies that to the people in government as well. Now, I know that he said this afterwards, that you can't retroactively charge somebody, but how many politicians, how many diplomats or high office officials went on vacation while they wagged their finger at us and told us to stay home over the Christmas break? It's a dozen or more, at least, that we know of. And people just get furious with that because and eventually you just get tired of it. You don't even have the strength to be angry anymore. And I'm afraid that's what's going on. And this is why people just kind of shrug and go, oh, well, we'll put up with this too. Not me. I am just fit to be tied. This is enough.
Well, that was pretty calm for you blowing off steam, Nick, and I'm glad you popped those safety valves, okay, in advance, because...
Oh, man, I'm telling you. You should hear what I wanted to say.
Well, look, I will take issue with one thing that you said. You described the situation as being one of, we don't know what to do, so let's do something. But I actually think it's a lot worse than that. I think that clearly they don't know what to do, but they do know what they have been doing isn't working. And somebody once said that the definition of insanity is that you keep on doing the same thing over and over again, expecting somehow to have a different result in the same circumstances. And it seems to me that ordering a curfew is doubling down on something that we already know is not working. And let me explain in a little bit more detail why I'm saying that, Nick. If you think about it carefully, okay, our businesses, we're already in a province-wide lockdown. Businesses are closed, retailers or stores are closed, except for, the handful that are selling groceries, even if they sell other things on the side. We'll set that aside for now. But everything else is closed. Restaurants are closed. Bars are closed. Where exactly do they think that people are going to congregate at 8 or 9 and 10 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock at night when bars and restaurants are closed and stores are closed and malls are closed, etc., and businesses are closed? There's just no place to congregate, especially in the wintertime. Nobody's going to be going out and sitting around the park watching fireworks or anything like that. So what is the point of a curfew now, telling people that they're not allowed to leave their homes, other than to tell you you're not allowed to leave your home, and if you do, you risk being stopped and arrested by the police? For what reason? And as I said at the beginning of the show, if I was here in the studio tonight doing this live show, at local time it's past 8 o'clock, if there was an 8 p.m. curfew, I wouldn't be able to drive home, even though I'm in the studio alone. I'm in the building alone, quite frankly, and I would just drive from here to home because I wouldn't be able to stop anywhere anyway, except for maybe, to pick up a drink or something, or a milkshake at a drive-through somewhere. Maybe that's a possibility. But I guess even the drive-thrus are going to have to close down at whatever time, because they won't be able to service. There won't be anybody to provide services for past that time if there's a curfew. So this is the thing, and I agree with you. There's an element here of flying by the seat of one's pants. And I guess this is what bothers me the most is I'm a law and order person, which means I believe in the need in a free society to submit oneself to lawful authority. So I'm not going to play it's a free society card, you can't stop me from doing this. Okay, as I always say, I've often said, Nick, I'm a conservative, not a libertarian. I believe there's a role for government. When my government asks me to do something or imposes a restriction on me, I'm prepared to go along with it as long as it makes sense It's not arbitrary, and we're accomplishing some kind of a good from it. But in the absence of that, in the absence of those things, I just don't see how, short of my not wanting to be detained by the police and having to deal with all of that stuff, because I'm a calm, cool, and collected person until, you try to arrest me for no good reason. And then I'm somewhat less polite than I normally am. It's a bad trait. That's the way I am, Nick. So, I could see that if the police stopped me, I would not be a happy camper, which means that they probably would not be a very happy camper with me. So there it is. What more can I say, Nick? I probably could say a lot more.
I'm telling you, Joseph, it's enough. It's enough to make you weep. Oh, we could go on for hours. And the trouble is, though, that the way that people, there's a lot of roles. This is a very divisive issue. Even in my own household, there are disagreements about whether or not a curfew / lockdown / travel ban would actually make a difference. And a lot of people would point to what happened in Melbourne, Australia, and say, see, it worked there. Well, first of all, you have a couple of differences to keep in mind. Australia is not Canada. Australia has a completely different climate than we do. If we tried, it's hard enough to get through a Canadian winter without all these things added on top of it that they just don't have to deal with in Australia.
Well, especially since they're going
I don't know that that's a really good comparison.
Well, they're going into the spring and summer in Australia, so completely right. Different situation.
Yeah, so that's what I'm talking at. That's why I'm talking about this. But when Canadians look at it generally, they say, well, some people will say these lockdowns are good, others will say they're bad, and it really can get feisty, even inside your own home. There's no agreement, at least, it can lead to very passionate conversations, and in extreme cases, people not wanting to speak to each other because they can't believe that the other person has that attitude, and that attitude depends on what side of the issue you're is being helpful at all. It's not doing anything to promote the idea of, we're all in this together, that famous slogan. Yeah, we are, but that doesn't make us all happy. We're not, this isn't like, okay, we're fighting World War II. We all have to put our personal feelings aside and put our shoulders to the wheel and get this job done. That sense is simply not there. So when you look at these issues and you think, what happened? How did we end up here? It all came on us on one hand in a rush, and another way it's been very slow and methodical. Like every time they go into more restrictions and people just take it and other people will stand back and go, wait, what are you talking about? We've already done all this stuff and it doesn't work. Well, let's take it up a notch. Well, if it's not working, what good does taking it up a notch do? So it's a very, very divisive topic, and I think a lot of people misunderstand the kind of damage or ignoring the kind of damage it's doing to interpersonal relationships, into the trust people should have in their governments and in their government's agencies, that is being eroded.
I have, I think, a partial solution to the problem, Nick, and it's this.
Please share it with us.
I think that one of the reasons why our governments have been stumbling from one idea to the next with reckless abandon, I think, is because there has been no consequence to those people who are making the decisions for the decisions that they're making for us. For instance, I believe that politicians, and I didn't think this way at first, but I've come to firmly believe